put these masks on, we can probably change our name placards, but they don't know.
Good. Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Item B, the verification of public notice and approval of the agenda. We do have one amendment tonight. We have amendment H2B8, which is adding a, I believe it's 7th grade volleyball coach, sideline 7. So with that change, I'd look for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
I'll second it.
Motion by Barry, second by Jeanette. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item C, a moment of silence to reflect on the business at hand. Item D, the Watoma Area School District Strategic Plan.
Mission statement, creative positive foundation for the success of our children.
Business and community involvement through internship, job shadowing, and mentorship.
Develop marketing of the district and community through branding.
Improve work and people skills.
Develop parental contacts promoting school involvement.
Build productive relationships with the medical field to increase the support and open lines of communication to support students with mental health issues.
Item E, recognition of persons wishing to address the board. We have none. Item F, staff and student presentations. We have the human trafficking presentation.
Nicole and Karen, if I can help you, we'll just bring your chairs out here, and if anybody else needs to bring theirs out, we can, just so you can, or if you, I suppose if you wanted to, ladies, you could just leave them and sit here.
I don't want to touch two chairs.
Okay, and we don't want you to do that either, but.
I want to be right in center here.
Just watch the pointing your head for the president.
Oh, yeah.
No, you're fine, it's right there. It's right there.
Projector was right.
Barry, you take me back.
It's not a projector. Not real to real.
Barry. Nice. Good school.
Real to real. Overhead.
No, I'm like, where is it? Barry. They take it from us.
And not 10 years old.
You're on YouTube right now.
You can't see my face.
That's true.
A little flash.
Yeah.
No, it's flashing.
It looks like it's turning on. You just can't see it yet. Oh, there it is.
Something's happening.
Brian, can you see okay?
You want me to, Red, you want me to move one direction?
You're good.
Barry, your head's
All right. So thank you for having me tonight and for being willing to be proactive about this particular issue and how it affects our youth. So since I was able to introduce myself a little bit in the letter that you guys got last month and give you a history of how we've been going about sex trafficking prevention in our district, I'm going to kind of jump right in. So there are a lot of misconceptions out there regarding sex trafficking, and so tonight I hope to look at some of those issues, talk about the truth about the epidemic that's happening, and look at what we can do as a district and what we can do on an individual level. So when most people think of slavery, they get an issue or an image usually in their mind of some kind of historical time period. And usually it's a time period that's in the past. Usually when they think of slavery, it's something that was accepted, at least by a certain group of individuals, and it was visible. Today, there are actually more slaves in the world than any other time in human history, but clearly it's not in the past because it's happening now. It's generally not acceptable. It's illegal in every country of the world, and it's hidden. We don't see it. It's secret. Today, it's referred to as modern-day slavery. You may have heard that term, or human trafficking, and it takes two forms generally: labor trafficking and sex trafficking. And with our students, we focus mostly on sex trafficking prevention. It's probably what they're most vulnerable to right now. I'm going to introduce the topic with a short video. It's a pretty heavy video, but it does a really good job of giving an overview of really what sex trafficking is.
Americans care a lot about money. We talk about jobs and taxes and paychecks, but here's what we don't talk about. Right here in the United States, there's a thriving underground economy based on selling children for sex. If sex sells, then business is good. Look at all the money. It was almost $1 billion in this study. But these dirty profits come at a huge cost. This is how sex traffickers do business. It's about supply and demand. First, they need someone to sell. Traffickers target children in their own homes. They find them by combing through social media profiles, looking to spark a conversation. The trafficker targets preteens and teens by finding an end, something to bond over and earn their trust. It could be the promise of a modeling career. They might buy them drugs or alcohol, or provide protection from an already dangerous situation at home. Traffickers gain psychological control and use violent threats to force victims to stay. Once the child is isolated from family and friends, the trafficker puts them up for sale. This is where the demand comes in. Traffickers use internet sites to connect with buyers or Johns, but calling them Johns is too polite. They are abusers. They are purchasing kids for sex. So who are these buyers? Court records show they've been teachers, pastors, cops, and judges. They could be the guy next door. The trafficker gets the money. The buyer gets sex. The child victim gets exploited and sold. So how is this different from prostitution, pornography, or other sexual acts? These victims are minors. Legally, they cannot consent. This isn't the movies. It's not like Pretty Woman or Taken. Richard Gere is not the buyer. Liam Neeson isn't there to save the day. This is sexual exploitation. This is trafficking. This is modern day slavery. It's selling girls.
So yeah, kind of heavy. It is a multi-billion-dollar illicit business, only second to the drug trade at this point. A couple of misconceptions that I want to address right away in that video. One of the things is they said right at the end, how is sex trafficking different from prostitution? That statement is misleading because oftentimes there's no differentiation between sex trafficking and prostitution. We'll talk about that in a little bit. The other misconception that I want to talk about really quickly is they talked about selling girls. And while it's true, the large majority of victims are females or women, and we're talking by large majority in the upper 90%. There are male victims of sex trafficking as well, and their trauma is equally as dramatic. A few things as we take a look at the definition of sex trafficking. So sex trafficking is when a commercial sex act is induced by force or fraud or coercion, as it showed in the video, or when the person induced to perform that act is under the age of 18. And when the child is under the age of 18, it's called domestic minor sex trafficking, or DMST, you might see. And force, at that point, force, fraud, or coercion does not have to be proven because a minor cannot consent. And that includes any physical act or visual act, which would be pornography. Something is generally given in, or is given in exchange for a sex act. Usually it's money, often it's money, but it doesn't have to be money to qualify as being sex trafficking. It can be the offer of shelter, a safe place to stay, food, drugs, or the withdrawal of drugs. It can be anything of value, anything that maybe the victim is lacking that the trafficker provides. That's exchanged for a sex act. Another misconception that people have is that sex trafficking happens overseas. They often think of it as a problem in third world countries or other countries of the world, or they think that trafficking victims in the United States are from other countries. Again, that's a myth. Most of our children and youth and people who are trafficked in the United States are citizens and are youth and they're from the United States. And I believe it's like in the upper 80%, maybe even 90%. There are also documented cases in every county of Wisconsin. A lot of people, again, are thinking that this is only taking place in larger cities, but it's happening in our suburbs and in our rural communities as well. So it's everywhere, and we need to be aware that it's going on. There was a presentation that I attended a few years ago in Stevens Point, and a woman from an organization called Damascus Road was presenting. This is an organization out of Oshkosh. They work with female victims of sex trafficking, and they put up this slide from data. This is showing victims that they worked with in 2017 and what towns they were from. So the numbers you see are actually population. And what they wanted to show, or what her point was, is that it doesn't matter the size of your town. It doesn't matter if you're from a bigger area or a smaller area. There's sex trafficking that's happening. And also, just because your town is not listed up there doesn't mean it's not happening there. This just happens to be a very small organization and where they were working with victims. So who's all involved with sex trafficking? It runs on the basic principle of supply and demand. And if there's a demand for something, in this case it's sex acts, there's going to be someone that's going to provide it. And that's going to be the trafficker. And you've heard me use the word trafficker. The more street name or common name, if it's a male, would be a pimp, and if it's a woman who's doing the trafficking, it would be a madam. And there's a reason that I use the word trafficker is because in our culture, when we hear the word pimp, people tend to associate that with something that's cool. So when I go into classrooms, or even with adults, and I say to students, what comes to your mind? Like, what are the first images that pop in your head when you hear the word pimp? So they start talking amongst themselves, and then we share out. And some of the things I hear is like lots of money, expensive suits, nice cars, big rings, gold chains. I've even heard things like top hats. So we associate it with cool. There was a TV show on not too long ago called Hit My Ride. If you remember, they took an old car and just made it super cool. If you do a quick search, you're going to get images like this when you type in pimp. Be assured that this is a photo that I don't share with students. I use that in adult presentations. But again, we're seeing this association with pimp equals something that's cool. So one small change that we can make is just even the way that we use this word. A lot of the trainings, or several of the trainings that I've attended, have been done by Officer Adam Nagel from the Appleton Police Department. And when he described pimps, he said they're some of the most heinous criminals he's come across. And I thought that that was a pretty strong word coming from a law enforcement officer who says a lot of really bad things. So, pimps are sex traffickers, very manipulative. But there's no profile for a sex trafficker. We can't say, put it in a box and say this is what a sex trafficker looks like. They can be young or old. They can be wealthy or poor. They can be from any race, any socioeconomic class. They can be strangers or family members. They can be part of a highly organized, complex sex trafficking ring, or it can be just within a family. Polaris Project, which is an anti-trafficking agency that has come up with a hotline and a text-to-be-free line, has been taking calls from victims for years, and they put together one of the first kind of comprehensive studies trying to get a grasp of what traffickers are like. And in their report, I'm going to just read an excerpt of their description of a trafficker and the recruitment methods and what they're like afterwards. So from the Polaris Project, traffickers frequently recruit victims by pretending to have a romantic interest in them or falsely promising they can provide shelter, financial support, or other benefits. Traffickers often recognize specific vulnerabilities and modify their recruitment efforts to exploit those factors by initially offering economic or emotional support. And then once recruited, extreme physical and sexual violence, often accompanied by weapons, is common. as is coercion in the form of unmanageable quotas, debts, threats of harm or police involvement, excessive monitoring, gang intimidation, social isolation, and constant surveillance. Traffickers often condition victims to believe that they are the only ones who care for them, and they are manipulating an attachment that makes the decision to leave a trafficker extremely difficult. So jumping back to who's involved, going from the trafficker to the victim, and again, you've heard me tonight use the term victim, and it's purposeful. A synonymous term for victim in sort of the street terms would be prostitute, and there's again a reason that I don't use that word, because oftentimes again we have preconceived images in our minds of what we think a prostitute is, and oftentimes, again these are images that I don't share with students but only in adult presentations. But often we think of a woman who's maybe like seductively dressed and is out looking for a date and is there by choice. And sex, in a panel discussion that I attended in Appleton, there was a survivor. Her name was Nicole. And when she was speaking, she just came right out and told us no one ever says when I grow up, I want to sell my body for sex and be used every night. She went on to say that trafficked persons will put on the appearance of choosing this or an appearance of something that they like or enjoy, but often that is out of fear or threats from their trafficker, or it can be just a way to cope with the very intense trauma that they experience on a daily basis. In addition, when we think about victims, they often do not self-identify themselves as victims. Again, they've been psychologically manipulated. They think this person loves them. They think this person is going to take care of them. They think things are going to get better if they just do one more thing. And they often won't testify. Sometimes it takes multiple arrests and people getting involved in their lives to even get them to see that they're a victim. A little bit more about victims and why I'm here and why I do what I do. Most traffickers are looking for younger youth, and again, a question was asked in this session as to why, and the answer simply was because the demand exists. So most traffickers are looking to recruit kids between ages 12 to 16, however, it can be younger or it can also be older. Most anti-trafficking agencies believe there's about 300,000 youth in our country that are at risk for sex trafficking and about 100,000 that are exploited every year. These estimates are sometimes disputed because it's very, very, very difficult to obtain accurate data on trafficking. It's not something that traffickers are reporting out. So even if the estimates are high though, those numbers and those young ages should concern us. And it's something that we should take a look at. In schools, every month we're required to do fire drills, right? And we do that for the purpose of prevention. But when we had our ALICE training, we learned that the last child to die in a fire in a school was in 1958 in Chicago. So if we do regular prevention for a relatively low risk danger, shouldn't we consider prevention for something that is much of a higher risk, being online predators? And my answer to that question, of course, is yes, and I think as a board, just because you invited me here, I'm thinking your answer is yes as well. Again, victims are largely female, but they can be male. And we can't build a profile around a victim either. They can come from any walk of life. So they can come from broken, dysfunctional families, or they can come from loving two-parent families. They can come from homes of poverty, or they can come from homes of wealth. They can be popular students who excel in school and are involved in extracurricular activities, or they can be students who are more outcast and do poorly in school. There are, though, some factors that are going to increase the risk of a child being trafficked. And so when you look at the list of factors that would increase the risk, it's concerning to me, and I would be thinking that it would be concerning to us as a district as well. Because when I look at that list, I see students in our district who would fall into one or more of those categories. So jumping back again to the cycle of who's involved. So buyers fuel the system. The common name for a buyer is a John, and you might have picked that up in the video. If there were not a demand for sexual acts, there would not be sex trafficking. I wouldn't be here. And anti-trafficking agencies are becoming much more aware of this, and they're looking for ways to decrease demand and to deter buyers. But honestly, right now, to be a buyer is a relatively low-risk, high-reward situation. And again, just like traffickers, we cannot create a typical profile of a buyer. A lot of people have a misconception that buyers are just pedophiles or creepy men like trolling through computers on a computer screen in their basement, and that's just not true. They come from all walks of life. They can be walking around in your community as an upstanding community member, all socioeconomic classes, all ages. One example that I share with students often is I have a relative who was recently in PA school, and one of her rotations was in a small town in northern Wisconsin, and she was working under a doctor, and he, along with 24 others, were arrested for solicitation of a minor. So again, an upstanding member of a small rural community in Wisconsin. I am super committed to representing the facts around the issue of sex trafficking as best as I know them, and to do so even when it's not easy. And so with that said, when we talk about buyers, most are male, and again, we're talking in the upper 90%. Some new information related to buyers was presented at a national conference that I attended last year in October. And it came from a study called Demand Abolition Report. And here is some of what they found about buyers in this one particular report. First of all, they found most men never have bought sex. There are high-frequency buyers, so 25% of active buyers account for 75% of the market. Many men who had bought sex in the past wished to stop. Men reported that if they knew they would be arrested, it would deter them. 1 in 5 was a juvenile when they bought sex, and 1 in 5 who had never bought sex said that they would if the circumstances were right. So I want to also flip to the positive side of that, because there have been events and conferences that I've attended, and I have seen men who have dedicated their entire lives to eradicating sex trafficking. And they are passionate and they are relentless. But if we're ever going to see an end to sex trafficking, we have to, as a culture, address demand seriously. And I think this means engaging men. I can give 100 talks to youth, but I think men talking with men is going to have probably more impact. I want to let you know, as a school board and as administration, that Andy Krieger, so your head football coach that you hired, is very aware of this topic. Him and I have had a lot of discussions together, and even had talked about co-presenting before COVID hit. And I use him as an example because, quite honestly, again, I can go into 7th grade classrooms or 8th grade classrooms and give a talk to kids I don't know. But the impact that he would have with a group of young men on a football team who he knows personally is far more impactful than anything I could ever do. And point being, every single one of us has a sphere of influence, people that we know that we can educate and teach about the issues of sex trafficking and change misconceptions. So, because demand drives the system, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the research link between pornography and sex trafficking. All of you may have different personal thoughts when it comes to this topic, but it is undeniable that the landscape of pornography in our culture has changed. I would encourage you to take an objective review of this issue, because it's being hauled by some organizations as a public health crisis at this point. I heard a speaker, Edward Sumner, speak. He's the director of engagement for an organization called Rescue Freedom, and he gave some facts about pornography. On one website in 2016, there were 4.6 billion hours spent on just that one site, which is equivalent, to put it in terms that are more understandable, to about 524,000 years of chronological viewing. The average age now that a child is exposed to pornographic material is age 11 or younger. Most sites have no meaningful age verification. And although there's almost an immeasurable amount of porn that's being consumed right now, he actually expressed more concern over what kind. It contains more verbal and or physical aggression by men against women and much more deviant sexual behavior. Other ways that pornography is related to sex trafficking is it can actually be sex trafficking. Again, if you remember the definition, it does not have to be a physical act, it can be visual. And if it's a minor, it's automatically against the law and there is not consent, there cannot be consent. Another way that pornography affects sex trafficking is victims, or it is often used and shown to victims to train them for what they will be expected to do. One of the best, most comprehensive websites that I've come across, organizations, is called Fight the New Drug. They are, and this is going to be hard to come by these days, but they are non-religious, non-legislative. They are a nonprofit organization, and they are committed to raising awareness and educating on the harmful effects of pornography, but using science, facts, and personal accounts. On their website, they have 3 3-minute videos. One addresses the effect of pornography on the brain and its addictive qualities, one on its effect on relationships, and one on how it affects our world and relates to sex trafficking. They've also produced a 3-part documentary series following those same titles. I've watched all 3 parts of the documentary. They are excellent. I would highly recommend, if you have time, that would be one place that I would point you to first. Today we're just going to take a quick glimpse at the 3rd video of how pornography affects our world.
Hit Nepal. Within 54 seconds, it had leveled over 500,000 homes and killed nearly 10,000 people. It was devastating. But what happened next was incredible. Almost immediately, neighbors from China rushed across the border to clear a road. Within 15 minutes, India had mobilized a full-scale relief effort, including medical supplies and rescue dogs. Before the day was over, people, money, and supplies were pouring in from 60 countries, 35 relief organizations, and countless businesses. Consider the world. More than ever before, we're able to help reduce human suffering anywhere, from natural disasters to a child's medical bills. In a remarkable way, technology can focus our attention and rally us around a single worthy cause, combining millions of individual acts of kindness into a massive force for good. Or combining millions of individual selfish acts into a massive force for harm. If the private act of viewing porn can rewire a brain, devastate a relationship, and destroy a family, what happens when that act is multiplied by 100 million? What happens when it isn't just you seeking ever more explicit pornographic material, but your next door neighbor, your teacher, your doctor? What happens when it's half your country? Today's rising generation is facing the issue of pornography at a level our world has never seen. In 2015, 4.3 billion hours of pornography were watched on a single website. That's 500,000 years. What are the consequences of 4 billion hours when pornography has been shown to increase marital infidelity by over 300%? What are the consequences when 88% of the scenes depict aggression or violence? What are the consequences when the porn industry has now been linked to abuse on set, child exploitation, and even human trafficking? When we discover that products are tied to abusive things, like child labor, we're willing to change what we buy. Isn't it time we had the same conversation about pornography's human impact? Somewhere, right now, actual lives are being made far worse by the million little mouse clicks around the world. So, choose love and humanity. Click on something else, take a stand, and pour your time and energy into something, anything, that might just make this world a little better for all of us.
So anything that Fight the New Drug does is just outstanding. And I just highly recommend that website. So what are the dangers for our youth? And where are our children most vulnerable to a potential trafficker? Many people, and I just heard this in a movie or a documentary that recently came out, many people still think that the physical danger to a child of like being outside or being harmed by a stranger is greater than the dangers that are online. And most experts are saying now that the opposite is actually true, that there are more dangers online. So you can see from the infographic here that traffickers are going to be wherever victims hang out, but by far the biggest place that they are recruiting their victims or grooming their victims is online, on different social media or online platforms that kids are using. So again, in a session that I attended at a national conference last October called Internet 101, it was stated to us that according to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, there are 750,000 predators online at any one given moment in time in the world. And so being aware of what's happening in our world and happening in the world of technology and having those conversations with our own children, having those conversations with our students, it's not important, it's like critical. Some of the dangers to youth that were talked about is, of course, grooming, which we're going to talk about in just a second, but there's also cyberbullying, sexting, the sending or receiving of inappropriate photos, which can also lead to sextortion, where someone is going to take that photo and use it to exploit someone with the idea that they won't tell anyone. And if they don't tell anyone, then it becomes the issue of sextortion. Cyber flashing, I had to find out a little bit more about what that was, but if you have like AirDrop on your phone and it's not turned off, you can get unsolicited sexual images on your phone, or kids can do that if they don't know how to set their settings so that they're safe from that. There's apps with artificial intelligence where you can take the face of someone that you know and put it in a pornographic image. Encrypted communication, dating sites, teen dating sites. So now predators don't have to even go looking. Young girls are on sites and they're finding them there. Again, somebody online can pose to be a younger person. They can create any kind of persona they want and make themselves sound appealing to these young girls. There's chat rooms, and then live streaming, of course. We, our youth, we're inviting people into their homes through live streaming that we wouldn't ever consider physically or personally inviting into our homes. And there's a very, very false sense of being anonymous, and a very false sense that the image is just going to go away. In the folder that you guys got last month, there's a resource page that it has all kinds of the best resources that I have found for sex trafficking. But I've decided to start one that is on the other side of your folder on digital safety as well, because there's so many potential dangers that is. There's so much good with it, but there are also dangers that we just need to be having discussions with our kids about. If there's one that, if you have a chance to jot it down or add to that list, that I just found out about a couple of weeks ago. There's a new documentary that was produced called Childhood 2.0. It's about an hour and a half, and it's done by some of the top experts in the digital world. And it talks about social media and the effects that it has on children and the kinds of conversations that we should be having with our kids. So again, it's called Childhood 2.0. Oh, I actually have it up here. Forgot that I put it in there. I want to talk, though, since we're talking about sex trafficking, I want to talk particularly about how the grooming process works. This is something that can happen super quickly, or it can happen over a long period of time. So there was an expert from the international organization called Shared Hope International. They created or someone from the organization created a false profile of a 15-year-old girl, and within about 7 to 10 minutes, they were exposed to a predator. And so she engaged in a chat, and she had screenshots of the chat dialogue that happened between her and the predator, and explained it to us this way, and other organizations have confirmed this as well. So the predator is going to try to make a connection with the child, and they are going to try to develop trust. They are going to look at that child's profile, pictures, comments made on their site or whatever social media platform they're using, and they're going to look for a vulnerability to exploit. It could be something like, I just broke up with my boyfriend, or I don't have any friends at school, or I just moved and I'm new. I had a fight with my mom. They treat me like a child. I don't have any friends. Anything that they can pick up on that they can exploit. And they're going to start a conversation where they're going to start chatting, and they're going to say things that the victim wants to hear. So maybe it would be like, no one understands you like I do, or you don't have to be alone, or I wouldn't treat you like that. I would respect you. You're really pretty. You're beautiful. I would like to be with you. Anything that's going to build trust and make the child feel better. And then they continue on, and they start to establish secrecy. So please don't tell anyone. Let's go private with our chat. This is just between us. You can trust me. Again, they're trying to isolate the child from friends, from family, and get them to trust them and think that they really care about them. And then they're going to begin to erode boundaries. So asking questions like, do you have a boyfriend? Do you have a girlfriend? Oftentimes the chats turn sexually pretty quickly. Have you ever had sex? How far have you gone? Oftentimes they might send a pornographic image and ask whoever it is they're chatting with how that made them feel. And they are most likely going to ask for them to send some kind of a picture back. Ultimately though, they don't really care too much about all of that and what happens. They want to meet up with the person. They want to develop enough trust so that the child or the person that they're grooming is willing to meet up with them. And when that happens, again, what follows can happen quickly or slowly. So maybe they'll treat the person really nice. They'll take them to McDonald's, or they'll have their nails done, or buy them some new clothes. But eventually they're going to break their victim, is kind of what they would call it. And once this happens, then they're going to use whatever means necessary to keep their victim there. That's their source of income. And when you think about sex trafficking versus drugs, if I were a drug dealer and I was going to sell drugs, I usually have my little packet of drugs. I don't have it today, not fake drugs. And I'll give it to someone, and she'll take it, and I'll say, so what's going to happen? She's going to what? Consume those drugs, and they're going to be gone. If I want to make more money, what do I need? More drugs to sell, right? In sex trafficking, the product that's being sold is usable. So a person can be sold once a week. They can be sold times in a night. They can be sold for months and years. And it produces a continuous profit. So a trafficker is going to do whatever they can to keep the victim under their control. A lot of people say, well, why don't they just walk away? Like if they figure out what's going on and that it's bad and they don't like it. Again, the trafficker at this point is going to use threats, either threats, personal threats, beatings, threats to their family, blackmail, drug addiction, drug withdrawal. They are going to use sometimes they move their victims from town to town. There's shame involved. Sometimes victims are afraid because they feel shameful for what's happened. A lot of times there's not a safe place for them to return to, so they don't have any place else to go. Those are some of the reasons, but there's this strong psychological attachment that happens, kind of likened to a trauma bond, and it's very complex and hard for us to understand, but it's a very, very powerful form of coercion, and traffickers are excellent at it. I've heard that it's actually easier to go to India and rescue a victim who's locked in a room because they know that they're a victim. with the manipulation that traffickers use, and that's involved with grooming. Victims do not know their victims. They don't self-identify. So people who know the child best, the people who are with them, so like that's us, we're going to recognize when something's not right. But it takes everyone. It takes everyone to know the signs of what to look for. Again, in your folders, there are a couple of warning sign posters that are in there. One is just for general trafficking, one was for familial trafficking, and one was for survival sex. And those are new, very up to date. They just came out this summer. But again, parents, teachers, coaches, bus drivers, law enforcement, healthcare providers, the hospitality industry, hotels, all of us, we need to know the signs and recognize what to look for, and that's when you can make a difference. So I feel like as educators, we're on the front line with this. We know when something's not right with our kids. I have heard several victims speak, and several of them have said that someone could have intervened on their behalf if they would have just known what signs to look for. It actually happened locally here in Oshkosh. Again, I'm going to refer to Officer Adam Nagel, who is from Appleton PD. There was a person like me in a middle school classroom giving a presentation to students and talking about the grooming process. And there was a student in that classroom who said, I think like this is happening to one of my friends. And they reported it to school personnel, and the school personnel reported it to law enforcement, and law enforcement got involved, and sure enough, they found that there was a trafficker in Oshkosh who was trying to groom this girl, and the girl didn't know it, and he was from Milwaukee. They arrested him, but because the other student recognized the signs and said something, the girl did not get trafficked. She did not get caught, and the guy was arrested. That's local, like that happened right here. Your folder is, again, full of some of the best resources that I'm aware of, but I also have a folder in my drive that is more comprehensive and has more in it, and I would be happy to share that with you. I generally share that with people who are interested after I give a presentation, so if you want me to share that folder with you at some point, just let me know. Other than that, I'm just going to kind of end with the Polaris Project Trafficking Hotline. And thank you for listening. Thank you for being proactive in this. Thank you for considering it and how it impacts our students and maybe what we should be doing as a district. I don't know if anybody has any questions, but
Now, so I know you work with our students, so what some other school districts are you presenting with?
so my goal is to have all of our students in Washington County get the same information. I have been to Wild Rose for the first year. So it wasn't this last year, but the year before, and we had plans in place for the spring when COVID hit. Tri-County was going to jump on board as well, and I was scheduled to go there in either April or May, and again, that was canceled, so we'll have to pick that up again. But I've also been to Princeton and Montello for students, and then I've also done adult presentations in different parts of the state. So locally, but also not locally.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Item G, administrative reports. Tom, anything to add?
Sure, just a couple things that weren't in my report. One is just to give some clarification, and obviously I've been communicating with you whenever we've had a COVID case that's impacted the structure of the school day. Just understand how we live in a couple different worlds. If a student comes to the office and they either have this one symptom out of category or two symptoms out of category that's considered COVID, they have to go home. Like there is no negotiation or like, oh, we'll keep them for the day. They have to go home according to the health department. If they go to a doctor, so they're not quarantined and they haven't had a positive case, but they have to be home for 10 days if they have symptoms that are similar to COVID. If parents take them to a doctor and the medical doctor says, hey, I've known this kid for 6 years, it's just his or her allergies. If the doctor writes a note, the child can come back into school. Okay, so two different worlds. We have the health department world, and then we have the medical world. If the child is quarantined as a close contact, or the child is a positive case, the doctor cannot write a note for them to come back. It's when a child is ill with symptoms and they have to go home. So if you hear those things out there, that can create confusion. But again, it's just sort of two different worlds we're living in. Health department's perfectly fine with that. If an MD is willing to put their name on a document saying the kid should be in school, they're not going to fight that. Now, again, if it was a 14-day quarantine or a positive case, they would fight that and not allow that back in. But just so you guys know if you hear that out there. Secondly, again, always with good intention, but obviously after we dealt with last week a little bit, and with parent-teacher conferences coming up, we are going to do them virtual or via teleconference. So either via telephone or we'll do a Google Meet with the parents. At the elementary level, it'll be in their classroom. It'll be aligned that way. At the middle school, it'll be in their CPR. And at the high school level, they'll do it through START. If they're having issues with a course or a class, they'll ask those parents, and then they'll reach out to that person who's doing the conference will reach out to the teacher to contact the parent to make sure. But again, we just feel like we, again, need to continue to eliminate contacts as best as possible to continue to move this thing forward to the best of our ability. So just so you know those two things.
Thank you. Jen, anything to add?
Do you want us to share numbers now?
Sure.
Virtual. And Doug's got our numbers, so I'll let him share virtual numbers.
Yeah, so right now we're at a total of 105 students that are online. 26% are 9th graders, 22% 10th, 21% are 11th, and then 31% are seniors. We have been in contact with all that are around 5 to 7 right now, and so we're continuing to communicate as much as possible.
That's it.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Adam, anything?
Just a reminder, this week we start with athletics, so that new policy with the 4 tickets for outside, 2 tickets for inside. Obviously, we'll work through any case, but I'm sure I'll get emails and questions. But so far, so good as far as the athletic.
Adam, I've had a couple of people reach out for the volleyball game tomorrow already about streaming. Is that available at the Dells? Or is that...
Dells is unclear right now if they are.
Okay.
As far as ours, we're still waiting for I was on with just the game. It's switched from I to Sky to just the game now. So we're working on the case for our home. I'm unaware if the Dells, they have not sent me anything.
Okay.
I know Adams, somebody else also uses just the game, but if they use Huddle, that's a different story.
Sure.
Adam, I know we can't control what the other schools are doing as far as their participation with fans, but if you do look at what we're doing here, and it seems like the response as far as people showing, if it would allow more people, is that something we'd look at in the future?
That would be something they'd have to go through the principals and the superintendent.
Right.
Yeah. But I think there's, I can't speak for.
That's what I'm saying, you can't speak to other districts. I'm talking as far as our home games.
Yeah, we sort of made an agreement with the other school districts in the conference that we were all going to do the same thing, so we wouldn't get this us versus them mentality. Just knowing how that, once somebody, you know how it goes, Barry, once somebody varies from the norm, then another district's like, well, they had hamburgers out there, you know, I mean, it gets that crazy. So we made an agreement that we would stick to the agreement all the way through, just with the focus on the kids.
Right.
Like we want the kids to play, and everything else sort of is extra if it goes well. So just so you know why.
And we're doing it for the schools that are coming outside of our conference, Marcus and Berlin, and there's one other school that we're only letting so many in. And I don't know, I think Tri-County, Green Lake is in a different story when I was talking to them. So it's consistent all the way across.
All right. So the coaching staffs for our coaching staffs will deliver the tickets to the athletes and they'll deliver them to their...
There are no tickets, it's the roster, and you just check in. They wanted to eliminate the touch of the tickets here and all that. So
That's right.
Just,
so our coaches have reached out to our athletes and the athletes provide the names prior to the contest.
correct.
And we're not going to check IDs. You know, if Chase came, you know, your family comes through and you got 4, and then all of a sudden there's 4 more, they would say, oh, wait a second. Type thing, but they're not going to be like, oh, let me see your ID, let me see your ID. Once the 4 go through, they know they're done.
I say you just check it off. All SEC athletic directors are the same. You have 4 tickets, you don't care whose name is on, as long as you are checking, and you only have 4 people.
Okay.
4 outside, inside is 2.
Do they still have to pay for these?
Nope, admission is free now. But no booster, well, I guess it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
It's free.
no.
There's no passes. I will tell you that 2 concessions is the only thing you might see different. If you do go to a away game, some have gone to a bag and a donation, and some have said we're not even going to deal with it. So if you do go to an away game, that was one thing you will see different, and it depends on the school.
Okay, thank you. Jewel, anything to add?
Just my virtual number, the 70 virtual students, 6 4K, 15 kindergarten, 19 first grade, 17 second grade, and 13 third grade.
What percent is that of your population?
It's about 20%, a little less.
Okay. Caitlin?
Sure, just my virtual kiddos. We've got 26 virtual, 2 from 4K, 7 in kindergarten, 2 in first, 2 in second, 4 in third, 7 in fourth, and 2 in fifth.
Okay. Deb?
Yep, at Parkside, we have 26% of our population total is virtual, that's 116 students. Starting with the 4th grade, we have 24 students at 32%. 5th grade, we have 16 students, that's 20.5%. 6th grade has 34 students, that's 33%. 7th grade has 21 virtual students, that's 24%. And 8th grade has 21 students, that is 21%. And
Okay.
26 students have changed since the start of the year. 13 came back and 13 went virtual, so it's a wash.
Jim, anything to add?
Just echoing Adam's position on sports, we're following the same guidelines in middle school, WIA, SEC guidelines. And just adding that the masks have been not, or facial coverings have not been an issue at school almost whatsoever. Complete compliance, I haven't been the mop-up duty of whose mask is this at all. It's been actually astounding.
Are they wearing them during volleyball practice?
They are supposed to wear them during, anybody indoors is supposed to wear a mask.
Okay, thank you. Tiara, nothing.
Nothing.
Okay. Anybody else? Cindy? Nothing. Nothing? Okay, board members? If not, moving along, item H, the consent agenda. We have the minutes of the August 10th, 2020 monthly meeting and the August 24th, 2020 work meeting. Entertain a motion to approve those.
Move to approve.
I'll second it.
Motion by Adam, second by Nicole. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. We have item 2, staffing 2A, 1 through 5, and B, 1 through 8. Unless someone would like to pull one of these out individually, I would entertain a motion to take 2A and B together.
So move.
I'll second it.
Motion by Barry and a second by Janetti. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item I, action items. 1A, business and finance, approve the August 2020 treasurer's report.
I make a motion to approve the treasurer's report as printed.
Second. Motion by Karen and a second by Brian. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item 1B, approve the vouchers and payroll.
I make a motion to approve the vouchers and payroll as printed.
Second. Motion by Karen, second by Brian. Any further discussion?
I just want to add that during finance, some of the COVID expenses are showing up on there, and those will be reimbursed, just in case anybody's watching and wondering if they've seen that, so.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item 2, policy. 2A, approved revised and/or new policies for second consideration.
There were some questions on the policies in first consideration. I did reach out to Steve O'Valley from Neola, and I did put the responses in your packet. Any further questions or comments about? Did that help Brian a little bit with? Yeah, okay, thank you. And Nicole, I think you guys went too. Or,
Yep,
okay.
perfect.
All right. Thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve the revised and new policies, second consideration.
I'll second it.
Motion by Nicole and a second by Karen. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item 2B, approve the Quest program through Fox Valley Technical College.
And I'll let Jennifer will present, and I can add in as needed
Chance to stand up.
if needed.
So you have in front of you, I give you a sheet, two sheets actually. One that I'll be referring to is the one that's horizontal. I wanted to start by just saying we do, if you look at the left-hand side, the biggest concern we had started out with is, there's a lot of different pathways you can create in the high school, and then the one we have is absolute, has been doing well for itself is Crossroads, a credit recovery system that we have in place for the students. But as you can see from our graduation rates, we continue to have just that clump of students who just never they continue to struggle to get that high school diploma. And they drop out, so we really want to focus on how we can provide another avenue for those students to graduate. And so therefore, working with Fox Valley Tech, I talked to them last February right before COVID hit, and they had a plan in place, ready to go, so we were able to hit the ground running this fall. Luckily, kind of get things rolling. Slowly, this is until you guys approve fully, the Quest program, which Fox Valley Technical College calls it the Quest program, which we would call it the HSED program. So these students that are in this range, we have already 5 students that have committed, that are in that situation where they're very credit deficient as seniors, would either struggle to finish credit recovery-wise at the Crossroads program, and either look at when they turn at the age they can drop out, would drop out and never finish. So we've hopefully caught them and put this in their program. On the right-hand side, you can see there's several districts in our area, and those are just a few of them I looked up with Tom's help that do offer this. There's definitely different ranges of how they offer it and how students get through it. Some work with a technical college, some don't, some have it just within their building. But as you can see, we're trying to keep up with others who offer this in our area. Obviously, we've gotten a lot of transfers this year especially. None that go into this program, but we often get transfers that are in situations that may fit into this program as well. Another reason we looked at this is because of our Crossroads numbers. A good thing is that the numbers are going down in our credit recovery. Some of that might be some of our target-based grading and some of the foundations of how that's set up so that teachers are assessing students differently and allowing them to move through what they know in a different way and find more success. So therefore, we already have someone in place who we can alleviate from the duties of the credit recovery at Crossroads and supervise our HSED students. So in the morning, Wendy Appel, along with Deb Simonson over at Fox Valley Tech, is supervising and supporting these students that are in the HSED program, and then she does the rest of her afternoon schedule, which she usually does. Mr. Zertler, he takes care of what he normally would take care of. In our virtual situation right now, he's actually helping with a lot of our virtual students because of the low numbers at Crossroads and how many kids are in our virtual program over there as well and are doing the virtual option. But this is very sustainable right now in our minds because we can move forward this in the next few years, whether we have COVID or not, because we have a staff member in place to monitor it. And Wendy's very excited about doing it, and she's very good at it. So, in previous years, I think it was 2 years after I had gotten here, we had students in the Fresh Start program where they go up to Wapaka, and they earn their construction certification along with their high school diploma. So it was already an alternative way of doing it. I don't believe we had board approval at that time, but it was something we did do, and the students did graduate with one of our regular high school diplomas. Being that this is a little more formal and involves some funding, a lot more funding, and I know Fresh Start had a lot of funding with it too. I just thought it was important to bring it to you so you knew that this would be almost like an addendum to the policy that our students can graduate with our high school diploma by still going through the HSED program. So if you have any questions about Fresh Start too, I know Tom can answer them as well, how that looked and how much different it might have been compared to what we're presenting right now. So on the second page, it just goes through kind of what students are required and what position they're expected to be in to be allowed into an HSED program or the Quest program. So I won't read through all those. I mean, you can see that, and it's pretty typical of where a student has to be to get started. Because of the age limit, Fox Valley Tech is able to work with the student until they reach a certain age to take the final exam. So they're very much so planning to prepare the student to pass the test at the time they're ready to be eligible to finish. So even though people will say, well, they're not at age to start things like that, they are just building them up knowing they're in that situation already. So, as you can see under completion, I just highlighted that a student must complete 4 core subject areas, including health, civics, literacy, employability skills, and career awareness. It's agreed upon with our Fox Valley Tech, even though they are, I would say, giving even a bonus of these classes already in some of the programming, that courses that the student might have already taken that will count towards some of their HSED work is our health, civics, careers, and financial literacy. So if a student finished that, they may be able to check off the box, they finished that and they don't need to do it as part of their HSED program. As an extra addition that we wanted to present, much like Fresh Start did when they came to you, if you guys were on the board at that time, we expected that, we wanted to set the expectation, that students would also have to come to you with a portfolio and present to you a resume, a cover letter, and letter of recommendation at minimum as a student who has completed this program, and present to you maybe a reflection of how they did, how it affected their lives, things like that. So as another step in just going through this program, in addition, they'd have to come to you and present a portfolio. That could be a very formal presentation. It could be just giving you the portfolio. We haven't really finalized that in detail yet, but that's something we felt that was important for our students to have that expectation instead of just finishing the program and receiving our high school diploma.
And if you need to remember, at one point you were very kind as a board to accommodate one student who didn't want to come into this setting, and we met early, and he came and presented, and it was a very big deal to him. You were nice enough to do that. So I don't foresee any situations like that, but you guys, you've definitely done over backwards to help them.
And just a couple other things I put on the bottom there too, and that is the Quest schedule, or the HSED schedule, is the student has to be half a day in the HSED program in the morning. Right now it is, and in the afternoon they have to at least have a half a day of electives or 15 hours of work study. So they have to have a full schedule to continue in this program. So what I'm asking for is just down below is just your approval to kind of be an addendum to our policy 5460, and I'm not sure how we present it that way, but and that can be added to our requirements for for our high school diploma, that a student would leave here if they complete that and follow those guidelines as on the second handout I gave you. They complete those guidelines, they follow all the same expectations of graduation, being able to walk, all those things, and still receive our high school diploma if they finish with this, following this program, or this path.
I'm assuming, and tell me if I'm incorrect or correct on this, that this, it's called a degree, this Quest program on the transcript, is kind of the final chapter for the student. This is their goal. They're not looking to go to Fox Valley, they're not looking to go to 4-year, they're not going to go to 2-year. They're not going to have the transcript for that, but what they're going to have is a high school degree, a diploma, and walk across the stage with their class.
Correct. Right.
And Fox Valley Tech will take this.
Yes.
If they wanted to go to Fox Valley Tech.
They will.
Yep, yes they will.
Yeah, so they'll get high school, they might also have the chance for tech school, or if they want to be on, depending on what some colleges allow.
They might have to go to tech school first before they would ever get the chance to go to college, though. Like, that would have to be their start.
And just, I guess the only concern I would have is, do we have any thought that a student might say, hey, this is an easier option. I want to go to Fox Valley and I want to go to their welding program. This is easier than going through the 24 and taking all this English and this math and this science. I'm going to take this. It's going to be a lot easier for me, then I'll go to Fox Valley anyway.
Right. That's part of the whole application process. It would be selected. We selected specifically of who are very credit deficient. They've tried alternatives. We're not going to let, and I even think about that with other ideas we have in the high school, where we don't want it to be an easy route and something they can just jump into and say, I want to do that. No, we've had to try other avenues first than to just go into that.
Some of them. And those of you know, like, normally you cannot get your HSED until your class graduates or until you're 18 and a half years old. So similar to Fresh Start, this gives us the opportunity to do that earlier. We have had students in the past who were in Crossroads who got into the second part of their senior year, knew they weren't going to finish Crossroads, left our school district, went to a school district that had an HSED program, and graduated. So we've lost out on kids off of our enrollment and off of our graduation rate because other programs, specifically Stevens Point, they were able to go up there and finish within like 2 months their program. So it is beneficial in that manner. We did pay Fresh Start in the past, that came out of the high school building budget. I will say, I would venture to guess, just knowing that Fox Valley Tech is involved, this probably has more rigor And the HSED program in Fresh Start did. Fresh Start was very focused on the construction piece and getting those guys into their certifications. And then did the HSED. I think it's going to be opposite in this situation. Secondly, we have had an industrial maintenance program through Fox Valley Tech. Our numbers are dwindling in that because it's a cohort. And so it takes 2 years to go through the program. Kids are not interested right now in a 2-year program. So the money that we would have budgeted for industrial maintenance will be going to the HSED program. So it comes out of the building budget. There's already money budgeted for that that Jen has, just so you're aware of that.
We would have that covered in its entirety in the industrial maintenance budget?
It would just be, there's a pool of money that goes towards Fox Valley Tech credit, college credit. It would be under that account code.
What kind of dollars are you looking at for funding on this?
What's that?
What kind of dollars are you looking for funding on this?
Yeah, what was it? How much was it?
It was 21,000.
Yeah.
Per year?
Yes, correct, yeah.
Sorry, 21,000 annual fee for us to have X students in there, or?
Maybe I heard you just say 21,000 per semester for 7 kids. So that's what we've had budgeted for industrial maintenance in the past.
Oh, industrial maintenance. You
Yeah,
weren't asking that. You were asking about what this costs.
I was looking at the amount of money needed for the program.
Yeah. Do we have that? The quest is 21,000 per
Yeah.
semester for 7 kids.
That's kind of replacing industrial maintenance. We only had 2 kids sign up, 2 kids backed out. So instead of just dropping that, this is now replacing what we would have put in funding-wise to industrial maintenance.
Gotcha.
So.
And Fresh Start was costing us about $6,000 per student at that time.
You're getting more bang for your buck with this. You're getting more bang for your buck.
I think we're addressing a group of kids that normally languish and never come back and get their degree or their diploma.
Right. Do you foresee with all the online education right now, do you foresee down the road, I know it's hard to tell because we just came back in session, do you foresee that once these kids get back in school and in regular classrooms, that you may see more of this down the road? That they may fall behind and then...
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I think we'll know probably more in about 2 months how virtual is going right now. But it's a possibility. In the springtime, we were very flexible. Everybody was very flexible in the spring. So nobody struggled in the spring because, whatever. That all changed now. So I think we get into November-ish, we're going to have a really good idea. Probably even before that. But you're right, Gary. I mean,
that was some of the concerns from some of the other administrators from their districts I've talked to was understanding that some of these kids aren't going to take advantage of what's right in front of them at home, and they're certainly going to be lagging behind, so they're wondering what's going to be needed down the road to make sure they have the opportunity to cross that stage and get their diploma. So.
Sure. No, you're right. And we had this discussion today, and we're not a virtual school district, and we don't have any intent to be one once COVID is over and social distancing is over. We're going to be a school district that offers what we offered, all the things that we offered before. Doesn't mean we won't use Schoology to help facilitate things, but we're not a charter school.
I also don't feel we misrepresented in any way, shape, or form that you are going to be able to get the exact same education virtually as you would in the classroom. Right? I mean, we're designed to teach kids, and the Schoology is assisting, but there's still a deficiency.
Yes, correct.
I think anybody in public education would agree with that. I mean, without a doubt. Even a parent, I think, would agree with that, for the most part.
Yeah, we're at 26-ish, 27% as a district. That's what they sit here today. So.
It just seems pretty similar across other districts that I've talked to. That 25% seems to be right around the magic number.
And like Tom said too, I mean, I think every year I get at least, you were there, you probably got, 3 to 4 people that want to transfer in the district ask if we have some. They often ask for the Crossroads program. And now we might have something else to offer them as well if we have this.
Crossroads is pretty, for those of you who ever did, it's pretty intense, and it's not for everybody. What this allows is a kid who can go and receive the content they need. They take a test, and if they get a score high enough on the test, they pass that component: social studies, science, math, and English. So it's sort of in their hands. I mean, if they do what they're supposed to do and they pass the test, they work their way to the HSED. So some of the kids like that better than the intense nature of crossroads.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Adam, second by Barry. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item 2C, approve the formation of a charter school investigation committee.
Sure. And this is very very ground level. We had talked about charter schools prior to from the state convention, and again, just as I was processing all that information, I tried to think of what do we try to do in the school district? Is we're always trying to prepare every student who comes through the door, and then when they leave, to be as successful as possible in whatever field that they're interested in. And in the same breath too, we tried to find out how can we keep kids in Waushara County that maybe do not want to branch out and go further, but they like to stay in the county, but really can't find that niche. And so I threw out there the environmental education, agricultural piece, the agribusiness piece, because in our county, there are a lot of food processing organizations or companies that occur. You can go Stone Ridge, Breakbush, Heartland Farms, Seneca. And there's a lot. I know there's a lot more that I'm missing. And we know that good, bad, or different in the world of agriculture in the state of Wisconsin. Traditional agriculture is trending down. Food processing is trending up at an inordinate rate. Both situations would be great avenues for our students. We also know environmental education is huge in this county with our resources that we have. So I don't know if this is where we're going to end up because there are other needs in this county: health, the health field, health sciences, IT, the computer science type things. So I'm talking with Ross today, and he gave me some good feedback. I think initially I would just like to get a small committee together and start investigating. Not even write for the grant this year, but look at it, maybe surveying our middle school kids, surveying our middle school, our families, our lower high school families, of down the road, what are some things they would like to see for their children, for potential offerings that we don't currently do in the high school and that we don't do at Fox Valley Tech. I know Chris Brown is highly involved in wanting to get agriculture, agribusiness through Fox Valley Tech. So I know she'd be a resource immediately. Here's the thing though, it's got to be financially feasible. We're not going to get money from the state of Wisconsin to do this. We're going to get what we normally get per kid. Now, if a bunch of kids open and enrolled in to be in this program, okay, that would help us, but we can't guarantee that that's going to occur. So are we going to have to hire more staff? Are we going to have more building space? This potentially would have it's going to have its own board, to monitor. So I mean, there's a lot of ifs here. But we can't ever go forward if we don't start looking at it and see what's available. So I guess I was just seeing if the board would be interested in forming a committee, and I could foresee on the committee, I was interested if the board would be okay if Jeanette would be on that committee with the agricultural piece. And if we end up going down that road, good for us. Obviously, I'd want Jennifer on it, I'd want Sierra on it, Cindy Riley, maybe initially Craig Ponich for the environmental piece, Chris Brown from Fox Valley Tech, just to see where it goes and start gathering information. Using our former alumnus, Sarah Welch, to find out, maybe are there some good survey items out there that we can ask our families to find out what are they interested in down the road and trying to keep people in our county. I think our county is on the verge, it is thriving, and I think it's on the verge of going to that next level. I guess I'd like to be part of that. And also, talking with Ross, and what are some of these companies willing to do for us? If we're willing to sort of get this going down the road, what are they willing to kick in besides us just helping them? What are they willing to do to help us? Because it'd be really cool if you could see a committee someday of having somebody from Stoner, somebody from Breakbush, somebody from Seneca, somebody from Heartland Farms on a board, or a DNR person on a board supporting our kids and making those connections. I'm talking that's probably 4 years away, but you got to start somewhere. So, anyways, I'd give you my best view. Maybe that wasn't my best, but it did the best.
I guess a couple of things that we talked about too, and Tom briefly mentioned it there. You see the agenda item talks about this environmental sciences and ag education and business, and I think those are, I don't have anything against those, certainly. And the only comment that I made is it's going to be an investigative committee. Should we be that narrow? And it sounds to me like maybe we wouldn't be that narrow. We should have an open mind of what do our families want in this community, right? And if it turns out, if we just go ask them, do you want environmental sciences and half of them say yes, you might ask them 4 questions and 75% of them say healthcare. And then, maybe that's our top focus, just, to really reach out and see what the need is. Because at the end of the day, it is an investigative committee. But at one point, we're going to be sitting here as a board saying, this is now budgeted, right? And there's going to be a cost involved with it. And as cool as it would be to have Heartland Farms and Seneca Foods and all these people on our board, it'd be even cooler if they were paying for part of the program, in my opinion.
Focused on the high school level, there are charter schools at varying levels. This is a place we have room, in comparison to the other schools. Because I really I don't think we want to build a new building. So this is a place where we could try to maneuver that, and with having Coxsackie Tech right next door, again, chomping at the bit to do whatever they can to help us out.
And depending on what the investigation looks like, ideally, when we talk about Focus 2025 items, we talk about being a magnet, right? We talk about branding and that sort of thing, and this all plays into that, in my opinion. If we could draw from surrounding districts or even the farther area, that's kind of what the goal is.
And Fox Valley is involved and their numbers support it. We always talk about the land down the road.
Yep. And I've already offered that up to them for the CDL piece, and they're still highly interested in that. In fact, they were really interested in it again until we had a little delay here, but I can see that becoming, they're full. They have a waiting list right now for CDL at our site. So you're right. No matter how this goes, I foresee a potential of incorporating a variety of programs. If you look at a program like this, you can incorporate welding, you can incorporate business, you can incorporate CDL, you can incorporate a variety of other options they have that a kid could leave by their senior year and maybe have some type of associates or some type of certification. Right. So there's a goal in mind or a light at the end of the tunnel, like, hey, this pays off if I stick with this for 4 years. Mm-hmm. What we haven't talked about is with a charter school, we can rewrite the rules similar to what Jen just talked about. You don't have to follow a traditional high school plan. So if you have students coming into this charter school, you can rewrite what that looks like, and it's perfectly legal. That's the beauty of a charter school. It functions outside of other state statutes. So things that we can do, no matter what route we go.
So you need a motion to authorize the creation of the committee?
We do.
Yes.
Also move.
I'll second it.
We have Barry as a motion and a tie for second. Give it to Jeanette, she's probably going to be on that committee. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item 3, negotiations and personnel. Approve the creation of a temporary Saturday bus cleaner position.
So as you can imagine, we're putting a lot of product on bus seats and bus floors and everywhere. So at some point in time, it has to be cleaned deeply to get that product. Otherwise, it just starts layering on top of each other. We had some bus drivers who were interested. It's a daunting job. It is a full Saturday to get it done with all the buses here and at Granite. So the bus drivers we had in, so we were paying them. It wasn't like we weren't going to pay them, but they just weren't interested after they tried it one time. So therefore, we could do it through the transportation department because we have no one interested. We really need to create a temporary position to get us through this time of reaching out to other staff members, or potentially we may have to go outside the district. There's someone at least a couple times a month cleaning up buses, and Dave has a protocol for doing it through the Bus Drivers Association and the Transportation Association of what product to use and what equipment to use. But we need to create the position before we can hire somebody to do it. That's why it's on here.
And zero effect on the budget because it's paid for by CARES funds.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, CARES or GEARS, one of those two.
Move to approve. Second.
Motion by Adam, second by Brian. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item J, Board Governance, 1, discussion only, legislative update.
Talked to Joan Baldwin's office as well as Patrick Keston's office. Nobody has been in session, obviously. There are some rumblings that some people think they should be considering scheduling to go back into session as time, but that has not come to fruition. They are obviously focused on November, both parties, and doing what they can do to support their party. They are also following and monitoring what the school districts in the area and what regions are moving more forward, what regions are holding back. That's all something we're all looking at. Nobody's willing to take the next step and go any farther. They're just not at that point. And they're going to keep an eye on Mr. Evers and see what he does with his mandate. And there may be some discussion at that point, depending on what happens there. But as far as really anything going on, there's no legislation, nothing taking place, they're not in session. So it's pretty much status quo.
Anybody else? Thanks, Barry.
Yep.
Item 2, discussion only facial covering structure after the state emergency order mandate has ended, if it ends.
So in your packet, you have a cover sheet, and then you have our current facial covering requirement, again, aligned to the current mask mandate, which ends on September 28th. The second page, highlighted in yellow, facial coverings, is what we initially stated we were going to require before the mandate occurred in early August. And then the last page was a survey that was given to CESA 5 schools. Obviously, those are not all the CESA 5 schools. Those are the ones that answered. But the ones in yellow are going to continue with the mask mandate if it ends. And there's a chance, we don't know, there's a chance it might not end. He may attempt to extend it. And because the election's not till November, no one may touch that. My recommendation, if he extends it, obviously that we would continue with what we're doing. After our bout last week at Parkside, and after reading some research from Duke University about facial coverings, they tested every facial covering. They did, they were able to use like white or black, what do they call it, white light, black light, and then they were able to see the aerosols go. They tested every single one of them out, and then they rated them, and then they gave their hypothesis. Again, non-political, just some research. They said gaiters are actually worse than not having a mask at all. It makes it worse. These masks are actually second or third best after the N95 mask. But what I got out of the whole hypothesis, and it sort of switched what I put in there, because I feel like I'm responsible for this, is that they generally said that, it gets through the mask, right? It goes. This does not stop transmission, but it may stop the distance of transmission, it may stop the viral load of transmission. So after our situation last week, my recommendation has changed a little bit. I feel like professionally I have to say, if the mask mandate ends, if this keeps us in school and keeps our kids in school, I'm recommending that we continue to renew facial coverings even if the mandate ends. I'll leave that as my parting comment to allow for discussion for the board.
To the administrators, Jim said there was no, you guys have any problem with compliance or anything like that?
Not awful at the level, maybe, the same 5 to 10, you don't put up over their nose or put it up, but not, they do, they comply.
And it's not disruptive to the day or education or anything like that?
No.
No. If there's a 0.5% chance that it helps 0.5% to keep the school open one day longer, I say we do it.
I asked Tom about, as you indicated there, Adam, what the reaction from the students has been. And I'm a little bit surprised, actually, that it went as smoothly as it has. And I see a lot of head nodding around the room that, we've done a good job from the top down. Does everybody love it? No, certainly not, right? Does it create initially some instances? Sure. But we're there now. It seems to be like we've kind of hit a groove. I asked Tom about staff and what the administrators thought. It didn't seem like there was any massive pushback to the masks. And I asked him his opinion, and he shared that with me. So, I happen to agree that I think we're in the groove, as I said. If we go to some sort of a hybrid, you're 6 feet apart, maybe it's more like 5.5, and that one doesn't have to wear it, and that one has to wear it. We're going to create, I think, more confusion and more administrative problems in the classrooms and in the hallways than where we are right now. It seems to be working, not perfectly, but what is perfect these days? So I would agree with that comment, Adam. I think even if it doesn't get extended, I would hope that we would
The other fear that I had is I think, you know, you have different subsets of fear and anxiety surrounding transmission, and I think that there's gonna be a certain subset of parents that feel safer sending their kids to school because they do have masks on. And I'm afraid that you're gonna lose even more to virtual education if you go to a policy maybe that's less, or more conservative, less conservative, rather, with the masks. So, I don't know, those are my pieces. I think if the longer we can keep school in person for the most students possible, I feel like masks help that. I don't see the harm.
You know, I know some schools have, even with the mandate, have gone to waivers and having people sign off. It's come back to haunt a little bit because then a lot of people go to the waiver and then they try to reel it back in because then all of a sudden we have everybody not wearing masks and, you know, then just that fear of potential cases. And then, you know how it is, once you give in, it's hard to reel it back type situation. And then you have some, you know, and I just want you to think about this, and some of the waivers have said, staff, you can't waive, but students and parents can. Okay, well, again, if I'm a staff member, I don't, you know, are you looking out for my safety? Are you looking out for the concern? So, and I agree with Ross. I feel like if you start giving too many ifs, if when, then it gets a little bit dicey, and then people start. Then you might as well not have it. I mean, in my opinion, you might as well just be on choice only. So, I guess my feeling again is if we truly want the kids in school, we want them to be here every day. If it provides any type of slowing down of the transmission, then I mean that's how I got to look at it, and that's how I have to move forward. Not looking at it politically, not looking at it emotionally, just trying to look at factual information to the best of my ability. That's all I can do.
Some of the initial information coming from CISA 6 districts and some of the superintendents is to keep the masks, even if the mandate goes away, but to go to a first semester. Let's just ride that out the first semester. Let's not wait till November and then revisit. Let's calm it down, have it go to the end of first semester, and then let's revisit, just to give us a longer timeline instead of revisiting every month or whatever. So my recommendation would be to keep the masks going until the end of first semester, and let's revisit at that point, in my opinion.
And I think if you look at the kids' position, and that's always my concern, when, you know, with all the, they go home and they hear the discussions and all the rhetoric out there. I think some consistency in knowing they come in, there's got to be more of a sense of security, knowing they're coming in a situation where they have a sense of security. So, and from the parents' perspective too. So I think it's easier for them to come to class to feel more secure, safer. So in this case, I would support following the wearing of the mask as well.
I agree. I was at the bus stop 2 times for the kids, and the first day, you know, they had their mask on, they couldn't talk. They were right in each other's ear talking. The first day, I'm like, oh, thank goodness they have a mask on. But it is. I mean, they just got to stay safe, and if they want to stay safe in school, it's important.
Tom, what are the mechanics of making it mandatory? I mean, is this adding something to a policy that
we can continue it to be, you know, we changed it into our reopening plan. We can just say as a continuance of our reopening plan, we're going to continue to mandate.
So that authority that we gave you in that August meeting or whatever,
Yeah,
that would extend to this.
Yep.
And there's really no sense in taking action now until we find out that the mask mandate isn't a
Correct,
extended,
yeah. We won't put anything out until September 28th or near.
My concern was if we needed a vote, we don't have a meeting between now and then, so.
Yeah. No, we can continue with our reopening plan. And if we were ever pushed on that, and again, if Tony, Rennie didn't feel like that, you know, we needed to go a step further, we can go a step further. You know, kind of on a moment's notice.
Sure.
Nicole, would you be okay with it maybe initially if in September 25th, I just saying definitely, you know, and then if we get to the end of first semester, then we can call it. My fear would be if I say first semester and then they think, oh, we're going to end then, and then what if it's not? What if it's not any better?
I just think the discussion back here shouldn't happen until semester, but you have the free reign to.
Yeah, just sort of saying definitely, and we'll examine it. Like you said, not month by month, but when we get to a big moment, hopefully, whatever that moment is.
Okay, I'll entertain that motion then to.
No.
Oh, sorry, it's just.
It's just discussion, yeah, it's really already in place,
Good.
so it's just making sure we're the same.
Anything else?
Thank you, yeah, thanks everybody.
Item 3, District Administrator Report, distribution of 2020-2021 Macomb School District Employee Handbook.
Sure. So Katie provided you with an employee handbook that she, Cindy, and Nikki worked on. You only have the changes, so you don't have the whole handbook. So if it looks light, that's why. The changes are in different colored font and usually underlined. A lot of it has to do with the staff retention and unification plan and some of the changes that we made. But there are other changes also. So please review it, and then we'll have it on the October meeting for approval, please.
Multiple considerations, or just that it will be approved in October?
Just one in October, yeah. We just want to give you enough time to, more than the weekend.
No,
to look at it.
Item K, board suggested future agenda items for our monthly meeting on Monday, October 12th, 6:15, right back here. Anything at this time?
In closed session, we'll have exit interview data. Good news is, it's light.
We'll have that in October. right?
Correct, yes.
Yes, sir. Okay, if you have anything between now and then, please advise. Item L, adjourn to close executive session. To close session under Wisconsin State Statute 19.851C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises
I'll
responsibility.
make the motion.
Roll call.
Roll call.
Roll call?
Ross Peterson.
Yes.
Matt Klein, yes. Karen Piat.
Yes.
Nicole Wade. Yes. Jerry Nestor.
Yes.
Adam Heck.
Yes.
Brian.
Yes. Okay, couple minutes?
Yep, we'll be back in the last.
Good job, Dean.